Ladies and gentlemen, we are back for another exciting podcast, the first in a long time. I'm here tonight with our guest, Gabriel L., and we are discussing the new Avatar 2, The Way of Water.
Let's get it done.
Well, it's a good thing to shut your phone off during these sorts of things. But this is the itinerary for today. We're going to talk about the good, the bad, and then the good again. We're going to leave out the ugly for today because it's a very beautiful film. So we'll talk about what we liked, what we didn't like. We'll keep it nice and laid back. I did have the good fortune of seeing the movie not once, but twice in theaters. First in Dolby Cinema and then in IMAX. So it was very exciting for me, especially since I haven't seen a movie in theaters in a very long time. So it was quite the experience. So I'm going to start by asking you a question. What was your experience? Not to go into details quite yet, but what was your experience of the film? How did you feel when you left the theater?
How did I feel when I left the theater? I'd say I felt mixed feelings. There were certainly feelings of, I guess, elation and at least in some lingering sense, euphoria from some of the highs in the film, and at the same time, it was a very long movie.
It was indeed incredibly long, about 3 hours and 10 minutes or something like that. The pacing of the movie is quite good. The first time around, I didn't notice it as much, but the second time I saw it, it really hit me. Like half an hour into the movie, I'm like, wow, I still have another 2.5 hours left in the theater.
The editing was tight, and I'm guessing, either guessing or I read somewhere that there's tons more footage. So whoever's been editing this movie has likely poured a massive amount of time into getting it as smooth as it can be for such a long film.
Right, and I would like to see that extra footage just because it's so stunning. The footage is so visually stunning. It would be very nice to, if there is an extended edition to the movie. So when I left the theater, I was like, wow, I just had an experience. That was an experiential movie. The sound, more so than the sound, the visuals, kind of felt like I'd just been on a ride in Disney World. It was so potent, the experience. And I would say with the first Avatar, I was completely blown away by it. Not the story, of course. We know the story is not the grandest of tales told by Hollywood, but the visuals were so visceral, and it had taken the bar of special effects to the next level. It had literally changed what special effects could do. It brought us to a world that was not Earth and made it seem lifelike and like you were there. It was an incredibly cool experience. I think some of the newness of that was lost in Avatar 2 just because we had seen it already, but technically the graphics were even better than the first one. They were absolutely stunning. But let's just dive right into some of the topics I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the things we both liked about the movie. Maybe certain things you liked stood out to you, maybe certain other things stood out to me, or maybe the same things. What were some things you liked about the movie?
Well, you mentioned quite a few of them right off the bat. starting with just the very visceral presentation of this film, the audio, the CGI. You talked about leaving the theater and feeling like you'd been somewhere and had a transformative experience, and I think that's exactly what James Cameron is trying to do. You mentioned a theme park ride, so it's funny because Scorsese was quoted some years ago as saying Marvel films are all just like theme park rides. It's gotten away from true storytelling, and all it is just trying to create a thrill-seeking moment. And I thought that was really kind of interesting, true, but also reductive, because that's exactly what you're trying to do. You're trying to give someone enough of a thrill that they're able to get to a different place. There is an endorphin rush associated with that film watching experience. So a lot of what you started out saying right off the bat are things that I went into the film expecting, reading about Cameron and everything he'd been investing into the film since the last Avatar movie in 2009. Apparently, he's just been cooking this project. So definitely having a shared appreciation for the massive amount of work that went into trying to make this a transformative experience is something that was definitely impressed upon me as I was watching it.
Right. Yeah, for sure. It was definitely a visceral experience. Now, getting into some of the nitty gritty of the film, this version of Avatar, this second movie, the sequel, it's very interesting because it's very much Avatar, but it's like in a game. It's like a new version of the same game where you're in a new location. So the first Avatar takes place mostly in the mountains and the forests, or maybe the forests and the mountains. This new version of Avatar takes place largely at sea. So we have a whole new ecosystem that we're looking at. We have the water, we have tons of underwater shots by day and by night, and a whole new set of animals and underwater fauna and coral, and it's absolutely spectacular. So I don't often see movies twice, just because I have a fairly good memory and I know what's coming. But even seeing the movie the second time around, some of the shots just awed me. Even seeing it the second time, like some of the underwater shots with the colors and the bioluminescence are breathtaking. And there's this one scene where the younger brother, whose name is Loak, he becomes friends with this whale. I don't know what they're actually called. Let's just call them whales. And he's doing like tricks with the whale, like in SeaWorld, where he's like the whale's jumping out of the water and he's like, doing flips in the air and stuff. And it is visually stunning. I was like, holy cow, this is some next level visuals that I've never seen before in a movie. So I am going to say without reservation that this is the most advanced and visually stunning CGI movie ever made. What do you think of that assessment?
I agree with you across the board, across the page. The work they have done is tremendous, shocking, unnerving in some ways, and it's so good, in fact, that at a certain point it begs the question: why are they doing it at all? They've been able to create these CGI overlays for these motion capture suits and the CGI overlays look so realistic. You're wondering, why don't they just shoot the actual people? But something you mentioned before about the video game concept, I think, is something that the filmmakers are uniquely aware of. In other words, this is a meta message, but it's also something that the filmmakers are doing intentionally. These people have seen and played a lot of video games, and the theme of this film, or one of the major themes of this film, is reincarnation. So we're reincarnating people into these avatars, and then we're taking these avatars and we're reincarnating them into different environments. It's like now we're on the Super Mario swimming level, very video game like, and very much in that reincarnation theme.
Yeah,
I'd say.
that's a great point you bring up. When I saw the movie twice, the movie starts with them talking about the life and death cycle and the birth of, I think, their first child. And the movie ends with that as well. So watching the movie again was kind of like it fed very well into itself. You kind of saw what they were doing, trying to talk about, just like what you were saying, the whole point of like the reincarnation and that things are connected and an ending can be connected to a beginning. So yeah, that's a great point. Talking just one last point on the visuals. There's some shots in space at the beginning of the movie where you see the spaceships kind of entering orbit. You get a view of the planet from space, and it's just another absolutely stunning shot. And I know we had different experiences with 3D glasses. I loved it, although I was having a little bit of trouble getting adjusted to them both times I saw the movie. The first time I saw the movie, for some reason, it felt like my left eye was out of sync with my right eye for a bit, and then I think that settled down after, some ways into the movie. And then the second time when I saw it on IMAX, they had a different pair of glasses. The glasses were different for Dolby and IMAX. For Dolby, they were kind of like sleeker sunglasses. The lenses were not as tall, and for the IMAX, they were just like the standard big plastic sunglasses. But the ones for the IMAX, it felt like the left lens was like much closer to my eye than the right one. So I was sitting there trying to bend the glasses like more into shape, which is very hard with the glasses made completely out of plastic. But I eventually figured out just to slide them further down on my nose. And so I was struggling with that for like good 20 or 30 minutes into the movie, which was super annoying. But once I figured it out, everything worked, and I felt that the 3D really made the movie more, more like you were in the movie, more lifelike. I know you had a different experience with the 3D. Do you want to briefly talk about your experience, not to go too far into that?
Absolutely. Just to backtrack for one moment, though, we're comparing and contrasting our experiences, and I'd say we certainly noticed many of the same things. That shot in space at the beginning of the film brought me back to the CGI landscape of 2009. I believe it was 2009 when we first saw the new Star Trek movie, and there are these space shots that I think were all created by Lucasfilm companies, and they're just incredibly lifelike, beautifully rendered, unbelievable CGI that during that time between, I'd say, 2009, 2011, the CGI was just stellar, and it's really, really gone downhill in the past decade. The beginning of this movie, I was just like, wow, this looks incredible. So just getting back to that point. Moving forward, the CG, right, the 3D glasses. So the theater attendant told me that there were different types of 3D glasses, and they had to give us a specific, a different than the regular 3D glasses pair for Avatar for the IMAX. I'm not exactly sure what the distinction was, but it was interesting to understand that there are different standards that were being insisted upon for whatever technology was employed in this movie. When I was watching it, this was one of the most frustrating things to deal with. I was constantly taking the glasses on and off because I was having similar issues getting my eyes to sync properly. After about 2 hours, finally, my eyes were kind of seeing the movie the way I believe it was intended to be seen, but it took a lot of practice. Also, the glasses, wearing sunglasses inside a movie theater is similar to wearing them outside. It makes everything kind of darker, and if the lenses are low quality, it kind of makes your image blurrier. So as someone with astigmatism in both eyes and not the most perfect vision, this kind of muddied the experience for me. Aside that, don't know if I said that right, but I really still managed to really enjoy and be blown away by the visuals in this movie. You're talking about that scene in the water with a whale, and I was also just in awe. And when we're diving into the water and we're looking at all this ocean life, which is inspired by real life and by James Cameron's real life adventures. It's you can tell they really put a lot of work into studying real life and trying to bring us something that was similar but different in a way to make us pay attention. I think it really breathtaking dedication in that department.
Yeah, that's really annoying to be, fighting with the visuals, to be fighting with the glasses when, the visual element is so important in the movie. I would say they recycled a lot of the glasses, and the pair I got for the Dolby had like fingerprints all over them. So like I got there a bit early and I noticed, and I was like cleaning them with my shirt. And same thing with the IMAX. And, there's something people don't realize when they get the glasses and they're sitting there with smudgy glasses and, it's really not great. It could ruin the experience or not make it as good as it was. I just wanted to make a real quick note, not to go too far into it, but I saw the movie in Dolby first, and then I saw it again in IMAX in Aventura, Florida. And they were both really good experiences. The Dolby Theater, I think, has a slightly better sound system, but it's not a huge difference. I think there's tactile transducers in the seats, so the seats rumble. Although someone was sitting behind me in the IMAX kicking my seat, so I got a similar effect, but maybe at the wrong moments of the movie. But it seemed like the IMAX screen had a nicer, clearer image. Maybe it was just brighter. I'm not sure, but I know that the IMAX here is a laser IMAX. So maybe, like you were saying, maybe the glasses bring down the brightness, and maybe the laser screen is just super bright, which helps with that. But yes, I felt that the 3D element really enhanced the movie and made it feel more like you were on Avatar. So moving right along, just one last thing, talking about the shots. There's some other shots that caught me that are inside the cockpit of some of the ships, and they send some submarines after the children. And there's some shots inside the submarines. There's like these little submarine pod things, and they have like a curved glass roof. And there's shots inside, and it's like it feels like you're in the submarine with the curved glass roof and the water outside, and just very, very stunning. Now to get into some things, I guess you can't have a movie that's this stunning visually without having problems elsewhere. That's definitely where the bulk of the energy in this movie was the visual element. But the story has issues. I would say the most obvious issue with the movie is reincarnating the bad guy who we spent the whole first movie trying to kill. So I think not just me, but most other people think that was incredibly sloppy. It does play a little bit into what you were talking about, the whole reincarnation thing, but that doesn't necessarily have to be on the human side. Maybe if it was just more in the Avatar world with the Avatar people, that would make a little more sense. Either way, I'm not sure why they did that. I was listening to an interview with James Cameron, and they were talking about Stephen Lang, who I believe is the bad guy, and they said basically he was the perfect guy. They auditioned a bunch of guys, and he was the perfect bad guy. Maybe they were just like, we found the perfect villain. Like, why try to find another one? But it definitely seems a bit lazy. Did that bother you?
So a lot of that makes sense. But just to backtrack again for a moment, to the submarines. That shot also stood out to me, and it seemed reminiscent of, I've seen some photos of James Cameron, it sounds weird to say it, of his expeditions, like his exploration of the Titanic, and you're seeing very similar submersiles. So clearly inspired by his life and that experience of riding inside one. I'm sure he got inside there with the camera and was asking, okay, how do I make this as real as possible? I want to take these people inside. So definitely noticing a lot of similar things and a real incredible attention to detail there. Moving forward, and we're talking about the story, right? So this is certainly one of the more frustrating elements of the film is the reincarnation of this character in I think perhaps in our shared opinion and in the opinions of many. However, like you just said, and I think that point is very cogent, they found the perfect bad guy in Stephen Lang, and perhaps they realized it after the fact, but it fit the motif of reincarnation anyway, so they're just like, hey, we already have what we need, and it's the best thing we have, so we'll just go with it, and it kind of works with where we're going anyway, because the story is essentially... They beefed up the story significantly since the first movie, which is something I didn't expect. They brought more gravitas and more polish to a sequel, which is something you usually don't see. So here they've made it deeper. We're getting into classic mythology and Star Wars themes, talking about fathers and sons. And that's what they're doing. Reincarnation, life and death, the birth of children, fathers and sons, and that kind of that dynamic that plays throughout all the stories that have ever really been told. So I think they do a pretty good job managing that. And also, at the end of the day, we are looking at Pocahontas Dances with Wolves, Fern Gully, the mashup, the sequel part 2 out of 5, I think.
You think there's going to be 5 Avatar movies?
Yeah. I think that's what they're planning.
That's weird.
I think it depends on the success of the most recent one.
To me, this seemed very
bankroll for the future.
This one seemed very much like a middle movie to me. It almost seemed reminiscent of The Two Towers, where, like, if you think about it, the end of this movie was not that epic. Like, it takes place on one ship. Like, it's not a huge war between the planets like in the first one. Kind of similar to Helm's Deep, which is just like a keep off to the side somewhere, away from the main parts of civilization. So it seems to me like... Or like Empire, the Hoth battle. This film definitely felt like an Empire, so I hear what you're saying. I'm not sure why they've decided on the number they've gone with, especially when the story is at this point.
unless they're really betting on their ability to one up their performance from the previous film in a way that is so significant and so exciting that it's going to generate more capital than anything that's ever been made before. And that kind of seems like where they're headed.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm thinking it's going to be a trilogy, and then maybe they'll have other movies afterwards or offshoots. Also, spoiler alert, forgot to say at the beginning, but this whole podcast is spoilers. So one of the kids dies, and that also seemed kind of reminiscent of other famous trilogies where the good guys take a hit and then they have a comeback in the third movie. Moving right along to some other annoying things about the story and the plot. They had this theme in the first one where Jake is this foreigner and an outsider, even in his avatar body, but the planet likes him. There's the bioluminescent seeds are falling towards him and, moving around him. So you have the same thing in this movie with Kiri, which is their adopted daughter. So that element is very similar. As I mentioned before, we have the same bad guy, and there's a lot of similar themes in this movie where the space people destroy something, and then what's her name? Neytiri, which is Jake's avatar wife, starts screaming. She has a lot of screaming moments. I think she has more screaming parts in this movie than talking parts. No joke.
She is an excellent screamer.
She's an excellent screamer, but there's the other woman, the queen of the village they're at, the sea village. She also has some good screaming in this as well. I was like, wow, this is some good competition. You know who the queen of the sea village is? Not gonna guess.
I do not.
She was kind of like a queen in another sea-based movie called Titanic.
That's what's her name?
Kate Winslet.
You serious?
Yes, sir. I had no idea until I looked at the IMDb page. But either way, they're both very good at screaming. So another plot annoyance in the movie was the children keep getting captured, disobeying their parents' direct orders not to go someplace dangerous. Happens multiple times. It happens twice. But the children at the scene at the end of the movie, the children keep getting captured and uncaptured 4 or 5 times in the course of the 40-minute battle scene. And you're just shaking your head. Did someone really write this? It's kind of kabuki. What's going on there? It's a little frustrating as the viewer to be like, oh, they're captured. They're not captured. They're captured again, etc., etc. And
this movie takes the theme of repetition and reincarnation and redos and repeats and sequels, perhaps to the most meta level possible in every way. They're just going for broke, it seems. Far more so than that latest Matrix sequel attempted to do. This movie actually does in just every department, in the story department, in the film itself. It's just this movie should just be re-entitled Meta.
Yeah, I wonder, maybe they did it on purpose so you could play the movie backwards or something. Maybe it's way beyond what we're envisioning. Who knows?
There's some very interesting edits coming out of this movie. I mean, with so much footage they've shot, just how people could reorder that.
I would think so. I was noticing more the second time around. Some of the choices they made went to end scenes and start other scenes, and move back and forth between Jake's family and then the humans or the bad guy avatars. And so yeah, there's a lot of plot issues with the movie. There's, like I just mentioned, there seems to be some strange cuts. Like there's probably going to be maybe an extended version or a director's cut of the movie that, maybe is a little different. Also, the movie is so eco-friendly. I don't know what the right word is, but
there's a strong, perhaps 1960s environmentalism message. Think of that Star Trek movie when they all go to save whales, like very much that kind of hippie era.
James Cameron is a super save the planet sort of guy, and it's all very intentional, the message of the movie, but I do feel that he pushes it maybe a little too far. There's a scene where they're drilling into the whale's brain, and the marine biologist, played by no other than Jermaine Clement, is explaining that the whales, I don't know what they're called, but they're whales for all practical purposes. No, that's Jake when he becomes like super chief and he rides the mega dragon.
Okay, I thought that was the name of the whale.
No, how dare you?
Okay.
I'm gonna do the woman scream. Jake!
Oh man, it's intense.
So he's explaining how the whales are super intelligent, and they're actually more intelligent than the humans. Their emotional center is larger, and they're composers, and advanced mathematics. And I'm just kind of like scratching my head, being like, they're whales. They ain't building no Atlantis underwater.
That it's certainly something interesting to ponder. What this is supposed to be an allegory or an allusion to.
I don't think it's an allegory. I think it's straight up like, whales and dolphins have intelligence, but it doesn't really approach human intelligence. Yes, they may be some of the smartest animals on the planet, but at the same time, a dolphin has never put together, let's say, a piece of furniture or written communication, etc., etc. Either way, I think it's pushing the point a little too far.
Something you just said kind of maybe made it a bit clear for me, kind of like reminded me of my own thoughts about this when I was thinking about it, because it's been a little bit since I've seen the film. The themes there were very family oriented. Like, I'm a whale. This is my pack. I was excommunicated from my pack. Now I'm alone, and I gotta whatever. So I think James Cameron was trying to impart the message that animals live real lives, like they're real things, and they have feelings and emotions at some level, and they have communities and bonds and all kinds of similarities to us. So he's really just trying to get us to see these creatures as in a human-like fashion as possible, to get us to relate to them. And perhaps he's going off the deep end on purpose in order to try to make us scratch our heads and go, what?
Right.
Like, how can a whale be smarter than me? And what am I supposed to do with that information once I've actually imagined that scenario? Where do I go from there?
You know what Brendan Fraser did? He became the whale after seeing Avatar 2, The Way of Water.
I got to see that. I haven't seen that movie yet.
Like
Brendan
they
Fraser's on the
accidentally
rebound.
catch Brendan Fraser and start drilling into his brain. It's like, oops, sorry,
Oh
wrong
man, you
well.
know what? That's perfect. I mean, I mean, there's something else, and you just reminded me of it again. Also, it's perfect. They're drilling into these whales' brains and they're extracting, and this seems to be a very common theme. There must be something meta and true about it. They extract this liquid that is basically being sold on planet Earth or wherever humans are living now as the fountain of youth. So it is the most precious thing ever.
$80
There's
million
nothing
a
more
vial.
valuable. Yeah, nothing more valuable than this stuff. And interestingly, Brendan Fraser is someone who's always projected tremendous youth and vibrance in all the roles that he does.
This place not so fruitful. Nobody here have big coconuts.
So interesting that comparison there. But yeah, there's an allegory there too. Also, I just watched this clip on YouTube from, I think it was Star Trek. I don't know if it was Insurrection. I think it was Star Trek Insurrection. And the whole plot of the film are these people who are living on this planet and they never age. And then there's these other people who used to live on that planet who came back to it, and now they're all old. They're trying to suck out the planet's life force. Exactly. And the themes are very similar. People doing horrible things to each other or to other life forms in order to preserve their youth and vitality and live forever. Kind of like, a deal with Satan, or, similar to the pit of Ra's al Ghul in Batman. He's like this demonic figure who goes into the Lazarus pit, and he loses his mind, becomes like a crazy monster, but for a short time, and he becomes young again. And that seems to be very much the thrust of evil, and maybe that is part of the deeper message. Clearly, James Cameron has done a lot of psychedelics and is very tied into these greater themes. And it's interesting, with all of this money and all of this effort, all of this knowledge and sensitivity, the level that we see this at is like, this movie is really stupid at times, like really, really stupid.
Right.
But pretty to look at.
You also another film that has a similar motif is Raiders of the Lost Ark, where you have the Nazis going to they're doing very horrible things to seek the fountain of youth and the goblet.
Right, yeah. And there's this old knight guarding it.
Yes, sir. So let's see. Moving. Oh, to just talk about one of the points you made. James Cameron is trying very hard to show that just because things aren't sophisticated or don't have, let's say, current Western civilizational values doesn't mean they're not important. Going back to the whales, but on a much broader theme of the whole movie is that the Avatar people, even though, they don't have the technological advancements of the space people or people from Earth, are still hooked into or connected to something much more real and vibrant with, more vitality. They're connected to a more real truth. And the space people, which is, I guess, an allegory for us, don't understand that and are trying to impose our world views and our civilization on other people. It's very much the colonial or colonization mindset, and James Cameron is pushing that very hard as well. But for me, it's it's a good message, but at the same time, with everything, there's pros and cons. You know, there's the pros of being maybe in a more fulfilling lifestyle without as much stressors, et cetera, being more connected to nature and being outside more, living a much healthier lifestyle. But at the same time, you know, modern medicine and other advancements do make a lot of things better. So it's one of those things where I can't get on board the message 100%, but I definitely enjoy it. And I liked your point regarding the whales, that it is made to make us think that even though they're not human, maybe they're still important and intelligent, but I still think maybe they pushed the point a little too hard. But maybe it's just for the shock factor to make you think, as you say.
I relate to a lot of what you just said. Very much on point with a lot of these thoughts. And that thing, there. Perhaps one of the signs of any great performer is delivering two messages simultaneously while misdirecting. So people are hearing two things, but only thinking they're hearing one. And in this case, it's many things going on. So we've got that message of environmentalism, colonialism, you know, all these classic themes. And then these kind of higher value themes, perhaps, about, humans have this artificial construct, this basically this replication of a network that already exists naturally in nature. And that's the one that they're kind of imposing on the world. They've become gods in their own minds, and they're trying to impose that on all of existence. Meanwhile, we already have this kind of psychic neural network that's available to us, this kind of synergy with plants and animals in the universe, and that's really going to be our saving grace, is our connection with things that are living. Similar to the theme of encroaching AI, which is very much in the gestalt right now.
So yeah, there's definitely a lot of this philosophy, James Cameron philosophy, floating around in the story of Avatar and the world of Pandora, etc. So now we're just gonna move on to kind of just other observations about the film. Probably most of them are going to be positive, because it's a movie that it's the only movie I could think of where the story is kind of lackluster, but it doesn't matter. The visuals are so stunning and powerful, and the world is so unique that it doesn't matter. You're enjoying the ride regardless. Something that's very interesting about this movie, the first Avatar, almost everyone in the movie was an adult, the humans and the Avatar people. In this movie, a large part of the movie is centered around children, which I found super interesting, and I didn't know that going into the movie. I knew it had to do with water from my amazing detective skills, and from some comment I saw maybe on Facebook that watching Avatar feels like being waterboarded for 3 hours. It was at that point that I'm like, I need to see this movie before like people give it away in comments on Facebook. But yeah, there's children in this movie. A lot of the movie focuses on children, and I thought that was really interesting. You have this child dynamic going on, plus you're seeing smaller avatars, plus you have a human boy, Spider, who's running around with them. So I thought that was really cool, and I wasn't expecting it. Another little surprise from James Cameron.
Very cool. You're reminding me about things that I saw and have. It's kind of in the back of my mind, and you're bringing it to the forefront. James is again, I believe, working with his spiritual themes here. He's showing how, as old as we get, we're always still children, and vice versa, and every which way you can kind of push that messaging, that the importance of being young when you're old, and the importance of being old when you're young in certain ways, and fathers and sons, and all that stuff.
And the
So
red balloon.
yeah, we put Sigourney. What did you say?
And the red
As a
balloon.
red balloon.
Yeah, the cat's in the
The red
cradle. And
balloon.
wait, maybe it's the
And
silver
red
spoon.
balloon and the silver spoon.
Little boy Avatar and the
Boy
man
in
on
blue.
Pandora.
Yes, lots of blue people in this movie.
I'm blue.
Well,
Isn't that what what's his name say? The bad guy? He's like, why is everyone so blue? Or something like that.
yeah.
Everyone's like,
Oh,
hurrah!
blue.
Get some!
Hoorah!
Get some!
Oh, I
Why
thought that
so
was,
blue?
that's also interesting. Just how quickly the bad guys became turncoats. Because, like, for the Stephen Lang character, like, you'd think that the most disgusting thing to him possibly, would be being an avatar. Like, but for the sake of this mission, it's almost like they're like Paro, and like they don't have a choice. Like, even after they're reincarnated, they want to kill these people so bad that they're willing to become those people. It's pretty crazy.
Yeah. It's also like very singularly minded in that there's this whole world of Pandora that has the humans coming, and they say there's a new reason unveiled why they're on Pandora. They're not just on Pandora for the mineral. I forgot what it was called in the first movie. There was
Unobtainium.
unobtainium. This super rare mineral that they were mining. Now they have a new mission in that Earth is dying, and they're trying to relocate Earth to Pandora. So they said that all in the matter of like 3 seconds in the movie, which is annoying considering that seems like a very large plot change in the movie that's going to affect this movie and whatever movies come after. And they just almost mention it in passing, but it's a huge part of the plot. So getting back to what I was saying, we have all these pieces moving. The humans are coming to Pandora to ready it for humans from Earth to come and, I guess, live on Pandora. And the only thing that we're focusing on that the bad guy cares about is killing Jake Sully. Like, don't we have a mission here to get the planet under control, etc.? And maybe Jake Sully is the most dangerous person on the planet. Maybe, but they should explain that. Like, maybe Jake Sully is the only one who really understands the humans, so he's the number one target, and it's in the interest of everyone on the planet to get him. But they just don't seem to make that super clear. Maybe they do in passing comments, but I think they could have talked that over a little bit more. So it's more like a logical step instead of this whole movie being one big vendetta with a dead guy.
After listening to you speak that out, it occurs to me that perhaps these kind of lulls in the story, where there really should be crescendos and there are dips, are really them just stretching the story farther than it should go. Because you're absolutely right. What this movie should have been, in theory, and they tried to do this a little bit, but it should have been like Rambo in the forest. It's like, there is this menace in the woods now that we have to contend with that is so big, but they didn't want to end the movie here. So they decided to put in fluff and filler and false outcomes in order to stretch things, because they want to push their climax to a later movie if they can. That's the way I see it.
Right. Yeah, I just think it would have made more sense for the humans to be like, we have this guy, he's a threat, he's the only one who knows the human technology. Let's assemble a team of guys. Let's put a large amount of our resources to tracking this guy down. Not just we're going to have some general who's going to go on his own wacky space adventure to track down his old nemesis. So I didn't like that so much.
They should have had the entire resources of whatever remained of the U.S. military after this guy, not just this small team.
Exactly. I think these guys are all mercenaries, but like former military, but I'm not 100% sure. Another point I'm going to move on to is there are the Sully family. The Sully family of Pandora has 4 children. They have 2 boys and a girl, and then they adopted Sigourney Weaver's Jesus child, like no joke.
Sigourney Weaver's slightly uncanny valley, creepy child incarnated.
Right. So, you know who voices Sigourney Weaver's child in Avatar 2, The Way of Water?
Sigourney Weaver.
That is correct. Ding, 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 ding. Very good. While watching the movie, I'm like, this person does a great job at capturing the Sigourney Weaver vibe, and now I know why.
I was just kind of like creeped out by it because I knew that was what was happening, and I'm like, okay.
Yeah, so I think they did a great job with that character. Very, very lifelike, kind of with real teenage emotional angst. Kind of a neat character, sort of spacey, kind of a little different from everyone else. I enjoyed her. I enjoyed the interaction with the Avatar children. So as I was saying, there's 4 Sully children. There's the 2 boys. The oldest one is Neteo. Then it's Loak. Then Tuk is the girl. And then Kiri is the adopted daughter who is, I don't know. I guess I don't know where she fits in age-wise, but older than Tuk, maybe around Loak's age. Not exactly sure. Either way, my problem was the first time I saw the movie, one of the kids dies, spoiler alert, at the end of the movie, and I didn't know which one it was because the 2 boys look very similar. So the second time I watched the movie, I was like, I am going to keep my eyes on these 2 kids so I could tell them apart and know which one dies at the end of the movie. And I was having an incredibly hard time doing that because they look very similar. One is bigger, but unless they're both in the same scene, it's hard to tell which one is bigger. And, they're not really wearing clothes, so they're both blue. And one of them had kind of like this tooth on a necklace. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to track the tooth. But then they change their ornaments in different scenes. So I did not know which son died the first time around. And the second time around, I did, but it took me almost the entire movie to figure out which one it was. So just to give everyone a heads up, as I mentioned before, the older son is Teneo, although on IMDb it says Neteyam, but I don't know. I'm fairly certain they were calling him Neteo in the movie. And the younger son is Loak. So if you watch the movie, Neteo is kind of like the more responsible kid, and Loak is always getting into trouble. He's going off when he's not supposed to. Loak is the one who gets most of the screen time. Neteo gets very little screen time in the movie. Loak gets the screen time. Neteo is the one who gets killed at the end for going along with Loak. Loak wants to go back and save Spider, and Neteo kind of goes along with him as he does other times in the movie. I guess he's looking out for his younger brother. Either way, that brings me back to another point I wanted to mention. There are some incredibly emotion-jerking scenes in the movie that I was almost like, why? Why do they have a super emotional scene in a movie that I don't like. The two emotional scenes are the one I just mentioned and the hunting of the whales. They're like unnecessarily emotional scenes. And the first time around, I kind of just went with it. The second time around, I'm like, this is overkill. This is unnecessary emotion in a movie. Like maybe I would say this, since the movie did spend a lot of time with the children, having one of the kids get killed off at the end of the movie wasn't a bad move. Story-wise, I thought it was good. Most movies don't have the guts to kill off a character, especially one that had some screen time, some real screen time in the movie. And the movie did a good job of making you feel that the Sullys were like a real family. It did a great job making it feel like there was a real family vibe going on. They had each other's back. So that one was, I don't know, it was very emotional. The scene with the whale was like a completely unnecessary emotional scene thrown into the movie, I guess, just to make you mad at the human people, which is us. Do you have any thoughts on
many thoughts? Yes.
Please
backtracking
elaborate.
for a second to this difficulty telling people apart. There's this line from the movie Catch Me If You Can, paraphrasing.
Knock.
Leonardo DiCaprio. Leonardo DiCaprio's like talking to his dad, or his dad. They got all these catchphrases and these pearls of wisdom, and he's talking about like the New York Yankees and why do they have stripes on their uniform, and it's because like zebras when they run together in a pack, you can't see them, like it confuses the eye. So I think what we're talking about here is essentially just an idiosyncrasy. The creators were trying to base these characters off of like I don't know what they're called, Maori tribes people, but they didn't realize just how confusing that would be for the eye. They're like, we want to be authentic, but we don't realize how confusing that will actually be when we put it on screen. So that's really interesting. Now, going back to emotions, yes. They decided to pack like a whole bunch of tear-jerking, not tear-jerking, massively traumatic scenes.
That is a great word, traumatic.
After the next. Yeah, and they're trying to be manipulative in order to evoke emotion because their story is so shallow that they just have to keep on punching as hard as they can in the gut to try to get the reactions that they want. That's the way I see that.
Yeah, I guess I would have to agree for the most part that they're really trying to drive home a point, and they're going perhaps too far. But as I mentioned before, I was very impressed with how it definitely seemed like a realistic family. Also, a lot of films have trouble with the viewer connecting with the characters because there's so much going on. You don't have time to just spend with the characters, to just be around them. Since this movie was 3 hours long, we got to spend some serious time around the Sully family. And I felt because of that, you felt like you knew them a bit, like you got their vibe. And I thought that was really cool, and it's something that's missing in a lot of movies. There were scenes in this movie where there's very little dialogue. They're just swimming through, some amazing coral reef, or, swimming with or alongside the whales. And it's just, there's music going on, but there's no dialogue, and just kind of gives you time to take it in, to see like, you know, the beautiful scenery and, you know, it's kind of just like spending time with some of the characters and letting you bond with them a bit. So, you know, kudos for that element of the movie and for allowing the viewer to connect more with the characters. And maybe it's something that's not really possible with today's movies and the shortened attention span of the viewers. Like maybe that wouldn't work unless you had such spectacular visuals. Moving on to a different point, maybe one of our concluding points was there were parts of this movie that I felt I was almost in a video game. Like it like crossed over that line, like from reality to video game, back to reality. It went back and forth a lot of times. The CGI is amazing. The close-ups of the Avatar skin looks very realistic, but still some of their movements for some reason have a little bit of that CGI feel where the motion just seems slightly off for some reason, and maybe like the colors of everything are too vibrant in certain spots. Maybe the high frame rate for some of the scenes in the movie kind of made me feel like I was in a video game as opposed to real life. And it didn't bother me, but I thought maybe that's still showing a limitation to some degree of the technology. It's still outstanding, but there were times I felt that I was, you know, in the most incredible cutscene ever made.
A lot of similar feelings there. I feel like much of this, I feel like this stuff is almost as intentional as it is unintentional. And with a project like this, it's like, you know, one or the other. It's either intentionally meta or unintentionally meta. I think I read somewhere that James Cameron said that this movie, you're supposed to see it in high frame rate because specifically for the CGI overlays, they need to be played back at a certain frame rate in order to look realistic and convincing alongside the real life characters.
That's very interesting.
That limitation is one that it may just be baked into the movie, but it may also be a limitation on just trying to get all the different theaters to show this movie in its ideal format, which I guess is impossible to do that and be able to make the right amount of box office. Right.
Yeah, I would say so. I guess not all theaters are capable of the higher frame rate, perhaps. So I, like I said, I'm not sure necessarily if that's a shortcoming of the movie. Perhaps it is. I'm not sure because I've never seen a movie where the CGI was so realistic that you had no idea was CGI. Like there were scenes in this movie, there were things within the CGI that you probably had no idea were CGI. The CGI is so good that it doesn't bother you. It doesn't stand out as CGI, but it's still like, okay, that's a thing that doesn't exist, or that's a thing that's like, it's moving in a weird way. It's too fluid. It's too rubber looking. There's still elements of that within the movie, or, you know, how the Avatar people move, as I mentioned before, but for the most part, it's done incredibly well. It doesn't detract from the movie, and you know, it's not like in older movies with CGI, like in like the Star Wars prequels, where everything with CGI looks like it's rubber. Literally everything, from the skin to the robots, everything looks like rubber. Like they did a much better job here. That I'm discussing more like the nuances in like the movement, or perhaps some of the finer details in the texture of some of the animals on Avatar, etc.
I believe what you're describing is referred to as the uncanny valley. It's this the human eye is very smart. I agree. And it's able to detect.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Oftentimes even the slightest discrepancy between something that looks real and something that doesn't look real, in all the ways you mentioned, in terms of the way light bounces off of it, in terms of the way light moves through it, in terms of the way things move in time and space. Like if this thing is moving too fluidly, like, nothing moves like that, so it looks fake. So they're definitely still dealing with that, and I think they're always going to be dealing with that, because that's just a limitation of CGI. Something that I noticed specifically, and I don't know if this was a frame rate issue or just this thing we're talking about, but Stephen Lang's character, the Avatar, the way his lips moved were wrong. Mm-hmm. Like they did not, and that's extremely difficult to do in CGI. Something they've been struggling with for years is to get the lips to kind of pull and move and wrinkle, because it's one of the most expressive parts of the human face, if not the most. To get that to interact and properly match up with the actor's face is very difficult.
Very interesting.
They've made massive strides in recent years and gotten it down very well. Like take Thanos, for example. That character is just amazing CGI work. So yeah, that all rings true, and it's they'll never be able to be as real as hard as they're trying.
Right. I think I noticed that too, that, as good as the bad guy's Avatar was, Lang, as good as Stephen Lang's Avatar was, like his real face is more realistic, but still very, very impressive. I did want to mention the end scene of this movie, which is like straight up, it's got to be at least a half an hour or longer. It's a very long action sequence, the end of the movie, and it's almost too much. It's like exhausting to watch. And they're all on the boat, they're all off the boat, the boat flips, they're all under the boat, and then somehow almost the entire Sully family winds up underneath the boat. It seems a bit excessive and drawn out.
It was so excessive,
yeah.
So drawn out. I was just like, I'm done. Like, I don't need to have another traumatic scene. I get it already. It's enough. Leave me alone. Let's move on. I was thinking exactly that. I'm like, part of me is like, I'm trying to enjoy the movie. I'm going to try to absorb these emotions and try to take the ride. But at the same time, I'm like, I've had enough. You've hit me over the head with this message enough times. You're being redundant in a way that is noticeable now, which is missing the mark because it's supposed to be subliminal.
So yeah, I would have to agree that the action sequence at the end of the movie was tiring and long, and I don't know if a shorter edit would do it justice, but I'm sure there are ways they could have gone about it that would have delivered the same message without it feeling so tiresome. Also, as I was saying, that like too many people are under the boat. It's Jake's under the boat. Stephen Lang is under the boat. Natiri's under the boat. Tuk's on. Everyone's under the boat. It's like, instead of like we're on a boat, it's we're under a boat. And then there's, everyone's going down to get them, and Loak goes to get Jake, and Kiri goes to get Natiri and Tuk, and it's like too much. It's like everyone's doing underwater aerobics. Everyone's doing this underwater maze. It's like, why are there two different things going on at the same time? It's just too excessive for me. And yeah, as I said, I think they could have gone about it a little differently.
I concur with these thoughts.
Real quick synopsis. I don't know if this will make it into the podcast, but just since I saw the movie recently, I'll give a real brief synopsis. So of as best I can off the top of my head. So Jake has children. It's in the future. They see a light in the sky. Avatar people are coming back. Avatar people are destroying more of the planet. Neytiri does some Neytiri screaming. The bad guy avatars are after Jake. Jake's kids are, off exploring, and they see Stephen Lang's avatar group, and Stephen Lang's avatar group captures the kids, and then Jake and Neytiri come and rescue them. And then they realize that Stephen Lang is, I don't know how to say his name, is after the Sully family, so they escape to the Sea Peoples. The Sea Peoples are reluctant to take them, but they finally agree. The children have trouble making friends with the Sea People children, and Stephen Lang is trying to draw them out. And what happens? What happens is Kiri has some sort of seizure underwater, and Jake calls his friend, the other science human dude, I forgot his name. He comes over with some medical equipment, and the bad guys see on the radar that his ship went out, so they were able to kind of figure out where they were. So they know they're within this island region, but it's very big. They don't know exactly where. So they start searching the islands one by one and terrorizing the villagers and burning their homes and, doing bad things. And there's more avatar screaming going on, and they shoot one of the sea creatures that they ride, and a lot of screaming. And then they decide a good way to draw out Jake would be to hunt their whale friends, because they love the whales. So they decide to hunt the whales in the Sea People territory, and it works. It makes them very angry, and Jake's kids go off again without consent because Loak has made friends with this lone whale, and the other whales were warned about the tracking dart that the humans use, but the lone whale wasn't. So Loak goes off to warn his whale about it. And of course, the other Sully children and the Sea Peoples, the crown children, or whatever you want to call it, the tribe leaders' children go with them, and the lone whale has already been tagged, and they try to pull it out, and then the humans start coming, and the Sully children radio to their dad that the humans are coming, and the Sea People get all riled up, and they go off for battle against the ship with Stephen Lang and the whale hunters. And that moves to the final scene of the movie with the big drawn out battle that we were just discussing, and Neteo gets killed, and tons of other people get killed, and there's lots and lots of explosions. And that's pretty much the end of the movie, where at the end, right near the end of the movie, Jake makes a speech. If I knew how to imitate his accent, I would deliver it. But he's like, "We can't run anymore. We can't hide. The battle has come to us. We're done hiding. We need to fight now." And it's almost the same speech from the first movie. I don't know if it's the identical speech, but that's literally that's like, before the big battle at the end of Avatar 1. I don't know what they were thinking. Like, did they literally recycle the dialogue? They recycle the dialogue, like literally, just like pull it out of the pile from Avatar 1. Not exactly.
It's just like, here, we're just gonna reprint the script. Give us money. We don't care anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was actually a really good job at imitating his very strange accent.
He's got a very strange
Jake
accent.
Sully, Sam Worthington,
because he's not American.
He's Australian, and he has, after all these years, never mastered the nuances of an American accent. Yeah, so he sounds very weird all the time.
Right.
Despite the limitations on that actor, I do appreciate the heart that he put into this. You can see it on his face. He's really trying, because he's working with actors, with many actors that are a lot more skilled than he is, and he's trying.
Right.
No,
I agree.
We have to remember that these people are all standing in an empty room wearing silly spandex and heavy cameras on their head and their faces and blue dots, and it's cold, and it's like the kind of acting they have to do to get real performances has got to be just next level.
I agree 100%. I think I heard that I think it was Matt Damon auditioned for the part, and Sam Worthington just like knocked it out of the park, and like the emotion he was able to put into a character, and especially, like you said, a character that's acting essentially on a big like green screen stage, essentially, although the technology is a little more advanced than that, but yeah, they're obviously not filming on Pandora, so like kudos to Sam Worthington. I thought he did a great job. I think Zoe Saldana, as I mentioned before, has very little screen time, very little speaking parts in this movie. Jake doesn't have as many, but he definitely has more. So I think he did a really great job. Everyone did a great job. Even Stephen Lang. Even Stephen Lang did a great job, even though he's supposed to be dead. But whatever. He's still a good actor, alive or dead. And
yes.
Whatever, aside from the fact that they shouldn't have used him again, he did a good job. The movie was a good movie. I think it is, once again, I don't think it's going to be everyone's cup of tea. If you're not going to really appreciate the visual aspect, or if the 3D is something that's not going to work at all, or it looks too much like a video game, if those things don't work for you, then you're essentially left with a not too amazing storyline. If those things work for you, then you are left with an amazing visual experience. And as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, I will say without reservation that this is the most stunning and amazing CGI movie ever made. And because of that, I think I would highly recommend this movie to everyone to go and see it. If the story's not your cup of tea, just focus on the scenery. If the story is your cup of tea, then I would recommend you still focus on the scenery.
It is a very meta film, as we've been saying. So perhaps there's different ways to take this. And if you like movies, if you like filmmaking, if you like seeing the dedication of thousands of people working hundreds of thousands of hours in order to bring something to life that is truly unique, then this may be something worth investigating. And again, that's taking it with a grain of salt of of all the shade that we've justly thrown at this project.
Right. So once again, it's like you read some of the reviews on the movie and they're all over the place. You know, people rip the movie to shreds on the movie just being a remake of the first, having a lousy story with somewhat shallow characters, but at the same time it's a palpable experience. And in this movie, I felt like I was in space. I felt like I was in the forest. I felt like I was scuba diving. I felt like I was on a spaceship. I felt like I was on a submarine. And that's an amazing experience to have in a movie theater, and one that is I don't think has ever been as visceral since I've seen Avatar 1. So a huge congratulations to James Cameron and the whole team. It's not a perfect movie, but I would still highly recommend it. And as I said before, it is the most visually stunning movie I've ever seen. So go out and see it if you can while it's still in theaters. Try to catch it in a nice screen, either a Dolby Cinema or an IMAX, you know, because it is well worth your time. It's not just a movie. It's almost like a ride at Disney World. Thanks a lot for joining me. I appreciate your input. It was a great discussion.
Hey man, I agree. Couldn't say it better myself.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.